Welcome back to the channel. Today, as promised, is rear suspension day for the Sequoia. So what I've got here are Old Man Emu springs. These are the 2862 springs, a very common choice for the Sequoia. Of course, anybody who knows anything about modifying Sequoias knows that we don't have any springs of our own. We have to borrow them from the Land Cruiser, but thankfully these fit perfectly. So we're about to put these on, but the really interesting thing about today is this. This is what I have declared as a long travel shock. I received some inspiration from someone else on the Sequoia Off-Road Facebook group. These are actually Summit Racing Universal shocks. I've also seen these branded under the name Skyjacker, but either way, these are universal shocks that frankly you can put on probably just about any vehicle as long as you have the right mounting points on either side, you have the right bushing, and also you have the right shock length. So I did the measurements and I found this shock is actually very similar to the Dobinson shock that is considered long travel. Obviously this is not going to be as high quality. After all, this is a $35 shock. It could be terrible or it could be great. The only way to really find out is to go ahead and put them on the vehicle. The one thing I did have to modify is the bushing on these. These came with a smaller bushing. The Sequoia has a 3/4 inch fitting. I'll link the bushings I bought on Amazon in the description, along with all the shocks and everything you need to do this job. Removing the old bushing, I'm gonna link another YouTuber's video in the description for removing the old bushing. I removed them a different way, but I can assure you, you don't want to do it the way I did it. It involved a hairdryer, several vice grips, several screwdrivers. It was a mess. Do it the way the guy in the video does it that I'm gonna link to you. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and throw these on, and hopefully at some point actually go ahead and flex out the vehicle and see what kind of travel we get on the rear axle. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the sway bar. If you think that's a terrible idea. Alrighty, it's been a couple weeks now since I put the new long travel shocks on the Sequoia, well, along with the new Old Man Emu springs. And the reason that I installed them and then waited a couple weeks to follow up on them is, for one, I wanted to try them out on some rough gravel roads, you know, dirt roads, and see how well they perform. Also see how well they perform on the road. And also, we were moving from Georgia all the way out to Utah, and we were towing about a 3,000-pound trailer the whole way. And frankly, I was not quite ready to disconnect our sway bar while trailering for all, 2,000 miles across country. But now that we're here, I've cut off the sway bar link. Yes, I had to take a cutoff wheel to it, but that's part of the fun of owning an old truck. Now, the sway bar links were actually not the only thing that I ended up having to cut off. The other thing I had to cut off was the old top of the shock mount. So, if you watch any of Josh Embry's install videos on his first-gen Sequoia suspension components, back in here underneath this right here in between the frame is where the top of the shock mount is, and he had a trick using C-clamp and channel locks to get the old shock off. That didn't work for me. So I ended up taking a reciprocating saw, like a Sawzall, and a big heavy-duty metal cutting blade, a 12-inch blade, the only one long enough to reach back in there, and I cut that thing off. And these new springs mean that the rear end doesn't sag anymore when we've got everything loaded up. The original set were doing that. My guess is that they were a little worn out. And the shocks with the sway bar disconnected means that this baby really should flex really, really good now. So that's the last thing we need to try out. We need to flex the rear suspension out, and then I'm going to have some final impressions on the rear suspension that we've concocted for this vehicle. there's our shocks and springs. And there's where the sway bar used to be, down in there. Well, the sway bar is still there, but the link is removed. And it's always a little difficult to show on video, but hopefully anybody who knows anything about Sequoias will know that this is so much more down travel than you get stock. So much more. Let me show you on this side just how much this tire is stuffed. Oh yeah, that's what you want to see. So anyway, huge improvement off-road right here. Yeah, really steep angle right here. And there's that wheel. Just barely came off the ground down there. Alrighty, so now time to wrap up and talk about the question at hand. Can you get long travel for cheap? And the answer to that, well, the short answer is yes. Yes, you absolutely can. I got the Old Man Emu Springs for just 180 bucks for the pair from First Gen Off-Road. And of course, the Summit Racing Universal Shocks were only $35 each. I pay a little bit for shipping. Either way, really not a ton of money for a suspension setup in the rear that really gives a lot of extra capability. Now, the closest comparison in terms of other quality shocks that you could potentially put on the rear of your Sequoia, the closest competitor is going to be from Dobinson's. You can get 2.5 long travel shocks from Dobinson, and if you compare the shock lengths, they're pretty much almost identical to these Summit Racing shocks. Those shocks from Dobinson's are $270 for the pair, so as you can see, you're saving about $200 by getting the Summit Racing shocks. Now, to a lot of people, that difference, $200 difference, it's not going to be worth it to them. They'd rather just have the best shock you can put on it. And to that I say, go right ahead, absolutely. But as you know, this channel is more focused on budget overlanding, so that's why I went with the Summit Racing Universal shocks. I just wanted to try them out so I could share with you guys how they worked. So yes, you can definitely get long travel for not a ton of money, but how are the performance of them? Well, they're pretty good so far. They are hydraulic, and they definitely seem like they might have been developed for a lighter vehicle than the Sequoia, so they're pretty soft overall. With the sway bar disconnected in the corners, you get just a tiny little bit of extra wobble in the rear end, but nothing that's scary and nothing that would ever make me feel like it's unsafe while driving down the road. So yeah, they're pretty good. I haven't had them in a situation where they've faded, although I'm sure somebody out there could definitely push them hard enough to make them fade. I haven't found that limit yet. And that's definitely an area in which a shock from Dobinson, Fox, Old Man Emu, they're definitely going to have some better performance in that regard. And then in terms of the long-term durability, reliability of the shocks, I have no idea. We're just going to have to wait and see. I made this video to, of course, give kind of an update on the rear suspension of the Sequoia, but also to present this whole idea of universal shocks to anyone out there who might be watching, whether you've got a Sequoia or maybe some sort of similar four-wheel drive Toyota. Maybe if you got a 4Runner or a Land Cruiser or a GX, an LX, or something along those lines, the same principles apply. If you get springs and a shock with longer travel, disconnect your sway bar, your rear end is going to have way more flex. And that's awesome. Nobody's ever going to complain about getting more flex when you're going off-road. So anyway, that's just a little update on our Sequoia. It's been a lot of fun building and developing it and taking it on trips with you guys, and there's more where that came from. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.